Change for me is a state that we've been living through history, all of us, always. I think what's interesting to me is people seem to think it's a 21st century phenomenon. I think the issue is not necessarily what change is. I think it's about the exponential rate and speed at which we're now living through times of change, and our ability on a human and emotional level, not just to cope with that change, but to feel that we can regain control of a process. I think really one word strikes me, and that is a sense of empowerment. You know, for most people in organizations, change appears to be systemic, strategy-driven, usually from the top down, usually something that people feel is done to them. And that, of course, results in all kinds of resentment, anxiety, stress. And I think if people are to deal with change better, they have to understand, particularly through the layers of an organization, that people can cope with change when they feel in control of it, where they feel a sense of ownership and empowerment, where they themselves are generating strategy and ideas which lead themselves and their organizations forwards. I suppose the first time I discovered change and really thought about it was as an educator. And a question I've asked myself most of my adult and professional life is, how come young children, from the time we're born to the time we're 5 or 6 years of age, don't see change as hard, difficult to deal with? It's actually what they expect from their lives. It's why they develop at such a phenomenal rate. And for me, the critical question is, where does that love of change go? How do we rediscover that passion and desire? And I guess most of it, in childish terms, would be around the idea that one of our natural states is to play. As adults, I would suggest if we substitute play for a condition around action research, where we're always prepared to ask questions, challenge ourselves, ask the what-ifs, play around with new concepts and new variables. You know, sometimes in very small ways, we can start to recondition ourselves to see change as a positive and powerful addition to the way we lead our lives. Firstly, I would suggest they go and talk to somebody they've never talked to before. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. Of course, the power of digital networking today. We tend to live in silos, and the silos close down the older we become. We tend to associate with the same people. We tend not to move outside of those circles. Having a fresh conversation with somebody you don't know well can often spark some very interesting dialogue. The second is to go and spend some time in a similar vein, experiencing something from outside your usual life. So in professional terms, it might be, if you work in the finance industry, rather than going on a professional course or training to do specifically with finance management, it would look for a company in a totally different field, or a social enterprise, or what have you, and go and spend a few hours just seeing what it is they do, to start to stimulate new thinking and new ideas in yourself. And I would suggest the third of those things is, again, very simply, be very aware of the things you lock down in your life. So, for example, daft one. If you usually on a Friday night have a takeaway from an Indian restaurant as your Friday night treat, and you always order chicken tikka masala, just once, try something you would never dream of usually eating off the menu. Because the ability to accept change is habitual, as it is with young children. And actually part of what we need to do is rediscover that habit to constantly push our own boundaries, question and challenge ourselves. When you look at the world around us at the moment, I think, we can't look very far from the new tech industries that have grown up through Silicon Valley in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and that we now refer to as 21st century organizations. The organizations like Google, Apple in particular, whose mantra when they're recruiting new staff, by the way, is we'll never employ anybody who needs managing. Facebook, Microsoft, these organizations have a culture which is always about looking to the future, challenging themselves, challenging their conventions. And they do business in a different way. They're not looking at what their competitors do, trying to play catch up, trying to copy or second guess. They're very clear of their own vision. They hold true to their vision, and they always try to create create in and around the people they have working with them, and that new ideas can spring from anywhere at any time from anybody. So it's that really organic view of how business and industry could be. And of course, our challenge is how do we take some of our more traditional industries and businesses and change the way we work to allow those kind of behaviours to proliferate. Now, the danger is you can't do that simply by creating a neat strategy or system. We have to focus far deeper on changing the behaviours of our people before we start to overlay systems and structures.